Welcome into Who's the Champ. I am Chris Helms. Welcome back in. Last week when you joined us, we were sitting down with Papa Stro, Rob Kellum, and I figured we'd just continue because I still got so much to talk to you about today, Rob. So let's go ahead and jump in. When we last left off, we were talking about you getting the name Gorgeous George III and making your way through Memphis. So now let's transition into where everyone will see you in the mainstream as the Maestro in WCW. Talk to me how you got that name coming into WCW.
Yeah, there's a big story behind that too.
Really?
I guess when I actually got hired, I got hired as Gorgeous George Third, and
Didn't know that.
did some tapings down in Florida, MGM, and I had matches as Gorgeous George there for when I first started and everything. And then later on, Randy Savage wanted to give the name to his valet at the time, Steph girlfriend at the Stephanie Bellers,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and just the story behind that is I had tryout um, earlier before with WCW because Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage contacted me when I was wrestling in Puerto Rico, and they wanted me to come meet them in the office and have a tryout match there at the Nitro there. So they flew me up from Puerto Rico to Virginia at the time for a Nitro there, and I had a tryout match with Jeff Farmer, who later became the NWO Sting, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember that.
And they were going to give the Gorgeous George. They were going to give the Gorgeous George name to Lanny Poffo and bring me into a whole new deal at the
Okay.
time, but which I was cool with, right?
Right.
Because I figured this would give me an opportunity, as well as just I knew Lanny could do the Gorgeous George persona justice. But neither deal for us went through. So I went back to doing independence, and then, of course, going to AAA with Jake the Snake Roberts as Gorgeous George III. And when I got back from uh, Mexico, AAA, I was doing some wrestling in Texas with some world class championship wrestling guys, veterans. I was wrestling with Black Bart and Wild Bill Oren and Skander Ekbar and all that, and Lance Von Erich. And when I finally contacted WCW, and they wanted to give me another tryout match, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they flew me out to a Nitro, and I had tryout match with Chavo Guerrero Jr., which I couldn't be any more happier and elated because I had so much respect for the Guerrero family. And uh, Chavo and I really had a great match that night. And after the match, a lot of boys were putting it over, and Diamond Dallas Page, remember coming up to me and telling me how I was like so light years ahead of the game from what I was, and uh, telling them a great match we had. And the agents walk in, and they tell all the different stories. It's like, yeah, the match was okay. If you could have done this and could have
Oh
done
boy.
that, right? And I I kind of resorted back to what my grandpa told me a while back. He told me always know who the boss is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Eric Bischoff walks in the room, right? And he comes to us and he says, great match, guys. And he looks at me and said, we could use a good talent like you. Welcome aboard. And as soon as he says that, all the agents will go, "Oh, great match! That was excellent." And I'm thinking to myself, "Okay, I get it. If there's a problem, I know who the boss is. I know who to go to, right?" And I walk out the door, and oh boy, all the boys are ready to shake my hand, welcome me into company, and it was such an awesome, awesome feeling. So fast forward that time, to now, after being almost a year with the company, uh, Randy wants to give the name to his valets, Stephanie Miller's. So I still wanted to do business. I still wanted to work something out with the company. So I, once again, going to know who the boss is, I went to Eric Bischoff. I had a meeting with him, and we put our creative thinking caps on, and he, they got wind of my theatrical background because I was in theater for a while. Um, I was different plays, Hamlet, Shakespeare, Cats on Broadway, even the Dodo Bird and Alice in Wonderland, all the various roles for theater, right? And um, we came up with the Maestro, which was it's still a throwback to the Gorgeous George, the third persona I was doing, but more of a musical twist. And my envisionment of the Maestro, it really didn't come out till later on in my WCW career, where I always envisioned the Maestro to be more of a fan of the opera type aura, to where even though I would come up classical music and the flamboyancy and the arrogance and all that, but I would have like a dark side, if you will. Something that would just make the Maestro snap, right? And based off the fan of the opera story. Well, so they made a elaborate platform for me, right, with a baby grand piano, right, to propel myself out of top of the arenas down to the arena floor on this platform, and while I'm playing the grand piano, right, and they had the candelabra and everything, and to train for that entrance as safety precaution, I worked with a stuntman a few weeks prior, which he would show me how to propel myself with a harness in case of emergency, right? Pretty much like what Sting was doing at the time when his Crow-esque entrance, if you will, coming out of the rafters. And I was learning to do that myself. And when I was playing the piano on those entrances, right, I would have that harness in the back of my tights. So where if anything were to happen with the platform, that I could propel myself up, to protect myself as far as safety goes. And Sting and I were the only two actually doing that type of entrance after the passing of Owen Hart, which I had deep respect for the Hart family. Matter of fact, one of my trainers, Nelson Royal, he was good friends with Stu Hart. And he would tell me stories about Stu in Calgary. And I had the opportunity, the distinct opportunity of meeting Owen and spending time with Owen, and what a great person he was. And when I asked Brett for permission to do that type of entrance, because if he would have told me no, I would have went to the office and said, no, no can do, out of respect for the family. But he gave me the green light, and I went with it, and the rest was history.
Yeah, absolutely. The rest was history. You just talked about Owen Hart. What a talent that he was, and he will definitely be sadly missed. And it was pretty cool that Brett, gave you the permission to do that. You were talking about the evolution of the Maestro, and as some of our News 2 fans know, because you've actually been in this studio with me promoting a show, you kind of turned your eyes away from the Maestro character and came up with this character called Papa Stro. Tell me the transition and how it became that.
It is interesting enough because I've always been a fan of psychological horror, like the old school psychological horror, like the old school Lon Chaney, of course, Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, and and all that. And I wanted to carry that through later on after my WCW run, where I kind of started to trend towards the end of my run, where if you notice, uh, every time I would hear bad music, I would snap and go crazy. And towards the end of my WCW run, and ironically enough, there were plans to put me with Crowbar and Daphne and have our own
Little faction.
crazy clique, if you will,
Yeah.
together, which I was really excited about because I traveled with them quite a bit and at the time, and but for some reason that didn't transpire. And that was when WCW was kind of on this downward spiral, if you will, unfortunately. And my contract was up, and there wasn't really much use to renew it when the company was bleeding financially, and it was about to go before it was bought out by Vince McMahon and so forth. But I wanted to carry that dark side and the love for the psychological horror and tell a story with it to where I would evolve into this Papa Stro persona where I envision Papa Stro as more like an avenging spirit, which would protect the souls of lost children from the evil in the world, right? And I would just think about my admiration for Kevin Sullivan and the crazy Terry Funk and all that, and I'll just channel that into becoming Papa Stro and just put yourself in the mindset and just because I was around Kevin Sullivan a lot when he was doing the Taskmaster and his meditations before he would psych himself up before he would go out to the arena and do his thing. And I was a big fan of the Army of Darkness there in Florida, Championship Wrestling Florida. Him and Purple Haze, Mark Lewin, and all that. And I was also a big fan of the crazy, maniacal Terry Funk, which I call him Uncle Terry because I told him I was going to adopt him as my adopted uncle. And ever since then, I always referred to him as Uncle Terry. And that crazy Terry Funk side, that middle-aged and crazy maniac that would just, you never know, so unpredictable, you never know what he's going to do. So I channeled Terry Funk and I channeled Kevin Sullivan putting together his Papa Stro.
I mean, what a terror that you actually made right here in this studio. Before we got all this craziness, not craziness, but the new studio, I said earlier that you were actually here and you actually terrorized one of our former meteorologists. And to this day, that's one of my greatest things here, being here, was to see that. That was absolutely great. Rob, I want you to stay with us. When we come back, let's talk about someone that me and you absolutely love. And we'll talk about the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, when we come back. You are watching Who's the Champ? Welcome back to Who's the Champ? I am Chris Helms, and I'm sitting here with Rob Kellum today. Papa Stro, the Maestro, Gorgeous George III, Robbie Eagle, whatever you want to call him. I call him a friend. I call him, a brother in the business. And one of the things that you talk to any wrestler today, any fan, promoter, wrestler, and anyone that's around this business, the one name that always pops up is the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Right now, everyone knows his youngest son, the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes, and also his son, Dustin Rhodes, now gone by Dustin Rhodes, Dustin Reynolds, Goldust, the original American Nightmare. But, Rob, you had a long history with Dusty. And, tell me how you felt about Dusty, and do you have any Dusty Rhodes stories to share?
I always loved Dusty. Dusty really looked out for me when he really didn't have to. He was a big, huge advocate for me, and there'll never be another Dusty Rhodes, man. Dusty has helped so many of us in the business. I can't even begin to tell. And a lot of the stars, even today, you see on television today, credit Dusty, for their success. And so, I mean, that's how big of an impact Dusty has had on all of us. Um, and being around Dusty, he's pretty infectious. It kind of grows on you, right? And it's it's Dusty Road Stories. Oh my goodness.
Well, hold on. I actually have a couple of them in mind that me and you have shared before. Um, let's, if you look at this, the total package, Lex Luger. Me and you shared a few dinners before, and you shared the story with me before. Can you tell me the story of Lex Luger and the cheesecake and Dusty?
Yeah. What happened was we're having dinner after the show, right? And we're all sitting having dinner, and Dusty puts some cheesecake in front of me. You want some of that cheesecake, baby? Get you some of that
Love the
cheesecake,
invitation, man.
And I was like, oh, even though I was stuffed, I was like, thank you, Dusty, I appreciate it. So I was going to eat the cheesecake, but I was still stuffed from dinner because I had a big dinner that night. So Lex is sitting over there across from me, right? So I slide the cheesecake to Lex. I said, "You want some of this, Lex?" And then Lex looks at me and says, "You're kidding, right?" I look back at him and says, look at you, big goof. That's that's the dreams cake. You gonna turn down the dream, right?" And Lex looks, Dusty looks down at the cheesecake, then starts eating away.
Oh man, it's still good, to hear that story because you look at Lex and just like we talked about him being the total package and everything. The man ain't had a carb, that when I met him, he ain't had a carb since he was a teenager, and it was great to see him be inducted into the Hall of Fame. But one other story that it's not actually a Dusty story. Lex Luger was my favorite Dusty story, but you would share stories from WCW and everything, and everyone knows how eccentric, how crazy Randy Macho Man Savage was. And there's a particular WCW story from then. Tell me about that real quick.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So Randy was the heavyweight champ at the time, right? And he was getting ready to go out through the curtain to do an interview with me, Gene Okerlund. So as he's getting ready to go through the curtain, I saw something that wasn't right, if you will. So
Mm-hmm.
I went up to Randy and said, Randy, I can't let you go out there like this. And Randy just looks at me and says, why not? And I'm like, I can't. I mean, there's no way I can let you go out like this. And he said, what did Hogan say anything? I said, no. Did Derek say anything? I said, did anybody in the office say anything? I said, no. Then why won't you let me out? I said, I can't let you do it, Randy. And he freaks out. Why not? Right? Freaking out. And I said, because Randy, your belt, it's upside down. And he looks down on his waist, and so it's upside down. Oh, snap. Oh, sorry. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. And Gene Okerlund's standing there across from him, is about to roll and laughing. Oh, man, it was tremendous.
Man, I actually wish I was there to see that. Randy and Gene Okerlund, man, I just see some of their bloopers and everything. Not really bloopers. You go back and you look at, in this business, you always have, they call botches, they call missed spots, but like Randy and Gene Okerlund, I've heard so many different stories. It's just absolutely hilarious. You can just get lost on YouTube just watching some of them stuff, like his stuff with Greg the Hammer Valentine, with Iron Sheik. the Kamala, so many different things with Gene Oakland and Randy Savage, cream of the crop. Can't do it as good as you, Rob, sorry. But, Rob, stay with us. We're going to go to a quick break real quick, but I want you to think about this while we're in the break. I want you to think about your Mount Rushmore of wrestlers. So when we come back, we'll talk about that. You're watching Who's the Champ. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Who's the Champ. This is the second week that I'm sitting down with Rob Kellum, Papa Stro, the Maestro, Gorgeous George III, Robbie Eagle. I'm sitting down with him, just having a blast. I mean, I don't want to stop this conversation, but, let's sit down, let's talk about a few things. Rob, you have been in the ring with some incredible superstars, but what are some of the superstars that you would say are underrated that you've actually been in the ring with?
I've everyone I've been in the ring with has really earned my respect at some point or another. I could tell you this much. I could tell you that one guy that I really was elated to be in the ring with, that it felt like almost like a WrestleMania moment to me, and that was Bam Bam Bigelow.
Really?
And I thought I was really on cloud nine to be in the ring with a big guy, and because I thought he was just an amazing talent for a big man his size can do what he can do, and for his size, I mean, he can go just as well as any cruiserweight. So it was just amazing to be in the ring with him, and gosh, being in the ring with him is something I will always cherish.
Wow. I really didn't expect Bam Bam's name to come out, but you know what? I can't disagree with you, Rob. I mean, the way that he would fly in the ring, a man that size doing a cartwheel, doing a moonsault, you never would think that flying headbutt. I mean, he was a big dude, and he was absolutely tremendous. You can see what he did in Japan, what he did, in ECW, in the WWE, in WCW, NWA. The man went around everywhere, and certainly an overrated, not overrated, I apologize, an underrated wrestler. He absolutely was that. So before we went into the break, I told you to think about it, and I actually gave you a chance to think about it. We've had about, 4 or 5 minutes to think about it, Rob. So now it's time. And I ask all my wrestlers this that I bring on. Who is your Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers?
Ric Flair would definitely have to be up there.
Of course.
On there. Harley Race.
Oh, that's a good one.
Gorgeous George. Yes, I'm pretty biased on that one.
A little bit.
And one more. Oh gosh. Well, I'm real old school, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to put Luthez.
Luthez. Wow. Okay, Luthez. I can't disagree with that. I mean, that's a heck of a list right there. Multi-time NWA World Champion Harley Race, the king of wrestling. A lot of people call Jerry Lawler the king of wrestling, but he was the king of wrestling. The very tough from St. Louis, Missouri. You had the Nature Boy, who everyone here in Charleston, not in Charleston, but everywhere, all over the country. Everyone knows the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. That was great, putting Gorgeous George in there. You wouldn't have a Ric Flair if it wasn't for Gorgeous George and things that he did. So absolutely, what a great, and then Luthez, which brings it all together, a professional wrestling and amateur wrestling together, because we wouldn't have a wrestling industry without him. Man, this has been so much fun these past couple of weeks, just sitting down talking with you, Rob, and we're getting close to the end of the show. And last week we talked about it, but let's talk about it one more time. you have, you're all over social media. You have your own podcast talk show on VOC Nation. You're in television, you're in music videos, you're wrestling, Comic Cons, all this kind of stuff. So if anyone wants to know what's going on in your life and getting information about where you're going to be, where can they find it?
Well, you can catch WCW Retro every Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on vocnation.com. And great podcast. We talk about wrestling nostalgia, wrestling news, plus so much more. It's always a good time, WCW Retro. And you can also, all the latest one stop on me, all my social media, announcements, appearances, GoFundMe, where you can donate, etc. Everything on me. You can go to my official website at chirp.me/Rob Kellum.
Oh, man. Luckily I got all that information. And, next time you're in Charleston, Rob, me and you, we're going to have another steak and we're going to have some more stories. I might even set a camera up and a microphone and just let us talk, Once again, Rob, I want to thank you for being with me these past couple weeks. Thank you so much for joining Who's the Champ. So much is coming up. I have some great ideas coming through. Hispanic Heritage Month is coming up, and I'm going to do a sit down, and we're going to talk about Lucha Libre wrestling and the impact on the world that it has done. Once again, I want to thank Rob Kellum for sitting down with me this week, Papa Stro, Gorgeous George III, Robbie Eagle, and also the Maestro of WCW and of wrestling. Once again, thank folks for watching. This is Who's the Champ, and I'll see you next time.